Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another video here on the Sports Daily Media Network YouTube channel. I'm your host, Sean Vowells. I've got Joe Meade with me, and tonight we are recapping the national championship. Michigan 69, UConn 63. Joe, obviously, this is not only your team, but you were there in attendance. So, what were some of your quick, I know we're doing this a couple days later, but quick reaction thoughts to you being a national champion?
Yeah, I mean, Indianapolis is better known as Ann Arbor South, and to be very clear, should have Michigan State or Illinois or particularly any of the in-state schools like in Indiana or Purdue been in this game, it probably would have been the same thing. But 80-20 crowd-wise, the crowd was absolutely electric. For people in there, you heard the "Let's Go Blue" chants around the arena well before tip. So definitely home court advantage for Michigan. And then, you know, long time coming, right, for the Big Ten shot. We talked about it for years on this
I think
podcast.
8 runners up before the last champion. But yeah,
Yeah, and 26 years and probably too long. You had some really good teams. That 2015 Wisconsin team comes to mind that lost in that very arena. Certainly two Michigan teams came pretty close. One not so close against Nova, I should say. Michigan State went there once, Illinois, and then Purdue, most recently in 2024, playing the Connecticut Huskies. But this time, Sean, I think this was the first time that the Big Ten was even favored in this game, let alone the market favorite. So pressure was certainly on Michigan to get it done. And luckily for them, they came through not only for the university, but also for the conference. I think, we also have a Big Ten football podcast. Yeah, UCLA women's basketball, certainly not one of the more followed sports, but for them to also win it, I think it kind of speaks volumes. The Big Ten was often made fun of, right, Sean, for having all these resources, all these large fan bases, alumni bases, and never coming forward. The last 3 years, they've come pretty damn close, like in basketball. Now finally broken through. While football, as we all know, Sean's an Indiana guy. I'm a Michigan guy. Plenty of Ohio State fans listen to this as well. Those schools came through as well. So very good to see for the conference as a whole as well.
yeah, it's probably water finding its level to a little bit. A lot of years for the Big Ten there, where they probably should have gotten a championship, and for whatever reason, it didn't happen. Now, three in a row in football, and then we finally get the monkey off our back in basketball. But Joe, obviously, good for the brand to have both of our teams win a national title this year.
Yeah.
Especially in the Big Ten, these sorts of videos have been some of the best viewed that we've ever done. So, that's going to be a thing that we do more of in the future. But let's get into the game a little bit, Joe. When we previewed it, we laid out some things that UConn had to do to win the game. And to be honest, like they did a lot of them. They made it ugly. They won the rebounding battle. Michigan didn't make a lot of threes, yet Michigan still controlled the entire game for the most part and didn't blow them out, but we're always in control. So this is one of those games where I think that the other team was significantly better. And no matter how hard Dan Hurley and UConn tried, despite playing the game sort of fully on their terms, they were not able to get the job done.
Yeah, and truthfully, Sean, if Dan Hurley, outside of seeing the shots go in, drew this up, it went exactly how he planned. Dusty May admitted in the post-game presser that's why Hurley's say what you want about him as a person, his personality, his antics. He is one of the truly elite coaches of our time, and most teams, I'd say most coaches with the personnel disadvantage they clearly had, solo
Yeah.
ball, being injured, and then being pretty quickly into foul trouble, along with Silas Demery. Terrace Reed pretty limited as well. All that to say, despite all that, despite all those flaws in their execution of the game plan, they were probably two shots away from setting this to overtime, potentially even winning. And I gotta say, Alex Caravan, I know necessarily not the greatest game from him. People are going to talk about the missed free throws. Certainly didn't hit every three he took. He had a lot of shots to keep them in the game. Braylon Mullins, I don't know what he's going to end up doing. Certainly, we'll probably have a UConn video. We'll discuss his status, but he got a lot of loose balls. Terrace Reed got a lot of offensive rebounds. UConn played how UConn and Dan Hurley ball should be played. Really hard, really great defense. Uh, Very physical, and the referees, I'll give them credit here. They really let the game flow. They didn't allow a lot of not way too many ticky-tack calls, no games perfectly officiated. And Dan Hurley would certainly, in the moment, say it wasn't perfectly
He
officiated.
actually, I don't know if you
But after the game, yeah,
yeah,
I'm saying in
but
the heat of the moment.
but this was something that was going around, Joe, and obviously as a Michigan fan, your opinion might come across as a little biased here, but I was shocked at the amount of casual college basketball fans and UConn fans that totally had the officials wrong here. They were really not happy with how things went, and I just think that was totally wrong. Like, this was a solid crew. Even Dan Hurley said after, hey, look, if these guys do every game of mine, I would sleep better at night. So I think that that is such a lazy and tired argument. Foul discrepancy, foul numbers. This is what both of these teams did all year. Michigan was in the top 50 in Division One in foul in getting fouled rate, and UConn was outside the top 300 in defensive foul rate. A team that fouls a lot fouled a team that gets fouled a lot. That's not surprising. And I actually thought they let a lot go, to be honest. And a lot of players were in foul trouble. Certainly, on UConn side, of Merez had four, and Yaxel and Cadeau with three. But yeah, I think that was such a lazy and silly argument from the UConn fans. And if you had come on and said that, it maybe would have come across as a little bit of rubbing it in. But I will for you here. We got a lot of engagement on Twitter from people who just don't understand college basketball, but yeah, I wanted to get ahead of that because that was honestly like a B plus in officiating, and I think there's plenty of terrible officials. There's been plenty of games this year that have been poorly officiated, but this was not one of them. I thought they did a good job of calling the clear and obvious ones and letting some of the stuff on the perimeter go.
Yeah, and going back to the game itself, Sean, uh, Michigan's offense, 2 of 15, notably from three. Not a ton of success down low in terms of getting it down low. Once they got it down low, I think UConn's game plan was to completely deny that. They did a great job doing that. Unfortunately for them, whatever it did, Yaxel, even in his one leg performance, and Mara, if it was deep enough in the post, converted. And Perez Johnson, really had a rough tournament on an individual level. Really came through this game. 10 rebounds, a lot of second chance points, was relentless on the boards, very physical, which is why he had the four fouls. Those were definitely earned, and very few of those I had much issue with. But Michigan kind of proved, Sean, that they were really good. They played UConn's game and beat them at it. Now, certainly not a pretty game, not my favorite national title game, just as a college basketball fan. But in terms of
But no
execution and
college
dealing with
basketball, no
punches,
no championship games are particularly sharp. Like,
no.
they're all in football stadiums. It's 2 days rest. There's 39 games of film out on you. Like, this happens more times than not in the championship.
Yeah, and the other thing here too, Sean, is a lot of tired legs in this one. A lot of short shots, a lot of pretty horrible looking shots. Let's call it what it is. And toward the end of the game, that Alex Caravan three, when Solo Ball hits the three, cuts it to 67-63. Roddy Gale misses the two free throws, and Caravan pops it. That's a shot. I'm gonna just make a bold claim because he's done it before in his career based on UConn's success in this tournament. He normally hits that, or it's not that short.
Yeah,
Is that the stadium? Is that his legs? I think probably a bit of both. Mainly the legs issue because
they
Alex
didn't
Caravan
come
played
off
his
the
ass
floor.
off. He
He
didn't
played
come
every
off the
minute.
floor, but that's all to say. UConn certainly left it all out there. I just think, and Dan Hurley said his post game presser too, Sean. I could live with this. My team just didn't hit the shots. There was nothing wrong with the effort, the want to, and I think the game plan was there. Just the actual shot making, which is something we called out a little with UConn when they went through some struggles this year. Eventually came back to bite them.
And the in-game interview too with Tracy Wolfson, Joe, which obviously you wouldn't have seen in the arena, he had a little bit of a different mentality going into this game. It was almost like he was like trying to embrace being the underdog for the first time, like ever at UConn, or at
Yeah.
least since they won that first natty. The basically every coach interview is the same. Look, we got to do the things that we're doing well. We got to keep doing those, and then we got to stop doing the things that we're doing bad. And he basically said, "Look, this game is on our terms right now. If we have any chance of winning this game, this is gonna be how it has to go." And that was like, whoa, like that was like what a 13 seed coach says when they're hanging
Yeah.
tough with the 4 seed at halftime. But I think deep down, Dan Hurley knew that his team was probably closer to the 10th best team in the country than the best team. And they ended up getting to the championship game because they pulled off one stunning upset. They got a little bit lucky with the fact that they played a worse team than them in the Final Four, and then unfortunately their luck ran out here. But yeah, I think he knew that this team was probably not as not even probably was definitely not as good as his two championship teams, and was probably closer to the 9 seed last year than the other two. Because it seemed like, hey, look, we're doing what we can here, and we're still battling. Um, but yeah, they didn't have sort of the assert our will and beat the other team at something that we're better at. They played it and they tried to play it on their terms. They tried to muck it up. They did. I thought Michigan's offense, let's say until the 4 minute mark in the first half, I think they went on a little bit of a run there to end the first half, which I'm going to credit to them that won them the game. You know, Mara gets a little bit closer on his post touch, and you get a few turnovers, you get a few drives, and then all of a sudden, Michigan was up by like 7. You're like, whoa, UConn has been the better team so far, and they're losing by 7. So I think it was just a really, really tall mountain to climb for UConn, and they came up just short.
Yeah, and we talked about a lot on our football podcast, and certainly here, UConn was a play away from being a play
Yep.
away. But in basketball, that's a lot more tight a margin than football. Football, that gets you a 10 to 14 point loss. UConn, in this case, Sean, after Solo Ball hit that three, there was real doubt in that stadium. And had Alex Caravan hit that three to make it 67-66, probably would have had about
Yeah, I think
15 seconds at that point. That title game, that finish gets a lot more interesting.
there are a few shots that we can go back and look. Well, if that had gone in, they could have been down 6. Or I think they had one. Was it a turnover and they missed a layup that would have brought it to 4?
Yep, and then
And
McKinney hits the three
and then
with two
McKinney hits
minutes
the 3. I
left.
mean that was it to me.
Yeah.
And the play away from being a play away thing probably I don't think it can be used as much in basketball as it can in football just because of so many possessions. But yeah, I think to be fair, this was the game that UConn was in against Duke, too. They were down the entire way. They had a bunch of threes late. They had a lucky turnover, and then here they are. They sort of put themselves in the same position here. And, when you get yourself into that spot, everything has to go your way. One thing doesn't go your way, you're done. And the missed layup, McKinney 3, was the dagger for Michigan. But the injury situation, I think, was a big part of this, Joe. And Ball was limited for via foul trouble or maybe injury anyway. And then with Yaxel, he clearly was not right. He plays 36 minutes, and Dusty tried to sneak him some minutes here and there around media timeouts. But there was a point where, like, it may have been better for Yaxel to be off the floor. And he didn't play particularly well, but he got his team across the line.
And ultimately, Sean, my goal for him is to get over 10 points. He does get
Yeah,
that. 0 of 5 from three. None of those misses were particularly great, to be quite real with you, and he was a defensive liability. But I think Dusty May's approach, kind of like his portal approach, is I want the best players, and then we'll figure it out. I think in the title game, not only was he actually not going to be denied, this is some rah-rah podcast rant, but
yeah, yeah.
there was no way Dusty's going to leave the Big Ten Player of the Year off the floor, and a guy who's very likely to be a lottery pick. I think Dusty losing that game with him out there could have been a lot more
Yeah, you
comfortable
can
than
live with
Dusty
that.
leaving him on the bench and losing.
And it also comes down to the fact, Joe, that, you know, the defensive scheme I think that Dusty employed was sort of what we expected and sort of not. They tried to hide him, right? They were switching everything when he was involved, and basically everything 1 through 4 with the jumbo lineup out there. And then when Merez was at the 5, which was a little bit like they did a few different things there. It was a fascinating X's and O's game to look at. Considering that short rest, like we said, one day of prep. I thought Dusty brought it X's and O's wise early on because I didn't think Michigan was executing that well, and they were able to play good enough defense to hold UConn. I think what are they up by 1, and then Michigan goes on that run. I think a poor preparation day from Dusty and UConn could be up by 8 to 10 in that moment, and then you think about maybe a different outcome late. But I think these are probably the two best X's and O's coaches in the game, and they did empty the clip in this one.
Without a doubt. And frankly, Sean, I think Dan Hurley mentioned it, not to future forecast here. His goal is to be playing Dusty May again in the tournament because the presumption would be to be pretty late, probably second weekend earliest. And with the way UConn and Michigan are going to be stacked up for next year, certainly even before transfers and draft decisions and whatnot, not crazy to think they could meet up in the Final Four in Detroit, Michigan, or certainly maybe in one of those Elite Eight games, like maybe perhaps potentially an East Regional Final next year. Could be one seeded UConn versus two seeded Michigan at MSG. Could you imagine that? Don't think this is the last these teams have seen of each other in the next few years. I'll make that prediction right now.
And in terms of those rosters next year, Joe, we don't know much, but if you follow the transfer portal up, both those teams are on a lot of lists, so
Yep.
chances are you get a couple of good players. Um, but in terms of the rest of the way here, it's the defense here for Michigan was the separator, Joe. It had not been the story for the tournament, to be honest. Early on against Howard and St. Louis, especially, like I thought genuinely poor defensive performances from Michigan, but you shoot it well, so you cover anyway. Alabama was probably like a good defensive game. I would say B plus, and then they really turned up the dial here on defense in their last three games. 62%, not 62%, 62 points for Tennessee, 73 for Arizona in a crazy up and down game with a lot of possessions, and then 63 here against UConn. Michigan definitely turned up the dial defensively after a little bit of a tough start to the tournament.
Without a doubt, Sean. And I think the biggest thing for Michigan here is their size, like it has all year, really affected Terrace Reed's offense. Don't think his rebounding was actually that much affected by Mara, which was a little surprising. But then again, Terrace Reed's one of the best rebounders in all of the country. And, Mara altered a lot of guard shots as well. Certainly, UConn hadn't seen size like that all season. I know Illinois is the tallest team in the country, but let's call it what it is, Sean. Illinois' defense is far inferior to Michigan's.
100%. And I think that it's becoming a little bit of a model here, Joe, where if you can turn off the water at the rim, you are in a really good spot defensively. And we have started to see that with, yeah, I mean, UConn's teams over the years have always had two solid bigs, whether they've both been starting or not. You had Arizona, you had Illinois, and you had Michigan, all with serious, serious height. I think, and Mike and I did talk about this in our State of the Union episode, which might not be out yet, so please check it out. But yeah, we said size might be coming back. The age of the guard might be coming to an end. But Joe, obviously Michigan national champions. We will still do our Michigan State of the program at a later date. But unless you got anything else to add, let's wrap this up.
Yep, we'll wrap it up and we'll see what happens next college basketball season.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.